Welcome to the After Work Hangout, the podcast where you'll hear why and how everyday people shifted their careers to meet their personal needs. I'm your host, Crystal Lee. As a career coach of over 10 years, I love to engage in real talk about work and life. In Season 1, we'll chat honestly about work and money. You might be surprised by the underlying factors that have led to different career and financial decisions. So listen, get inspired, and make the moves that are right for you. Miranda, thank you so much for joining the After Work Hangout. I am eager to introduce you to our audience today. Everyone, Miranda Maslany is a graphic recorder and illustrator based in Vancouver, BC. She does live graphic recording, hand-drawn infographics, and digital illustrations. Miranda, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Crystal.
Yeah, Miranda, you and I have been friends for a little while now. I knew you, I think, when you were still a student, so it's been really cool to watch you grow. And along the way, you've been such a great friend because we've both kind of navigated that journey of balancing employment, like working for others, and also self-employment. So that's kind of what we're going to focus on today because you have really great insight now, in hindsight, perhaps, on knowing when to make that jump to self-employment. So maybe we can hear a little bit about your career journey because you started out in the nonprofit sector and now you work for yourself. Maybe even before that, like what exactly is a graphic recorder and illustrator for those who don't know?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'll start with a brief intro on that. So graphic recording is the idea of going to any scale of event. So it could be like a one-person meeting. It can be done in coaching sessions. It can be done at a large-scale conference. But the idea is the graphic recorder is capturing in illustrations and hand-drawn text what is happening in the room and really focusing on those high-level moments and learnings and takeaways that if someone, was taking notes or wanted to reflect back, those are kind of the most important nuggets to think back on, a week from that event, a month, a year. And it's just a really nice way to create an artifact of the event. But it also creates a really beautiful opportunity to bring visuals and illustrations and like playfulness into the event itself. And so I always encourage clients to come and visit me while I'm working and check out the graphic as it evolves. So it's a really fun job. And illustration, I feel people think most often of like book illustrations, like children's books. I don't do that. I primarily focus on digital illustrations for organizations. So I work primarily in the nonprofit sector, but also for some businesses as well. And so it'll be anything from, illustrating for annual reports, research reports, websites, you name it, social media, marketing. Illustrations can be used in any way to kind of bring engagement and draw people's eye to the information you're wanting to share. So that's the graphic recording illustration side. And then I know you also asked about kind of my career trajectory. So is that a good time to kind of dive into that?
No, definitely. I'm so curious. Like you mentioned, you have over a decade of experience in nonprofit. Like, was it related to any of this or was it something different? I have no idea how one even becomes a graphic recorder. Like, did you study?
Yeah.
I'm so curious.
Yeah. So it's interesting because when I was in university, I didn't know right off the bat what I wanted to do. I actually originally wanted to go to art school. My mom's a graphic designer and I have a lot of artists in my family. And I thought, I'll probably go do some sort of art school. But at the time, I just didn't have the confidence to necessarily apply. I think it's funny how sometimes having a family of artists can sort of work against you in the sense that you have all these accomplished, amazing artists in your family. And it's sometimes hard to see yourself getting there to their level. And so I ended up doing more of a social sciences degree at UVic. I did environmental studies and sociology as a double major and then a minor in business. And the environmental studies was primarily because you have to do a double major. So I tacked on the sociology and then business. And it really helped me kind of see a lot of like environmental issues from different perspectives. So I really enjoyed the program and I got so much out of it. And I did the co-op program there as well, so I was exposed to a lot of different work environments and was very career-driven and career-focused and had fully planned to go and do a career in the environmental sector specifically, and then sort of got a little bit burnt out by that by the time I'd basically graduated, doing a lot of volunteer work and work in different parts of the sector, even though I'd really enjoyed it. But I just remember when I did my first co-op term, I went to this one like green drinks event, and I met all these people that had all these jobs I had never heard of, and they sounded so cool. And for the most part, it seemed like they enjoyed what they did. And I just thought, oh my gosh, like there's so many jobs out there that I don't know about. How could I possibly know what my dream job is or a job I would enjoy when I don't have a grasp on, the full kind of range of what's out there? And so it kind of gave me a little bit of permission to kind of explore and kind of be a little bit more laid back in how I approached finding that dream job. And it's just really interesting that kind of fast forward to today. Like I had no idea what graphic recording was when I was a student. Uh-huh. But yeah, so I did that degree program, co-op program, and then I pivoted more into working for organizations that focused it on kind of supporting nonprofits. So instead of working directly for nonprofits, I was like organizations that helped with grant writing and strategic planning and all the sort of things that go into making a nonprofit successful, and some social impact businesses as well. And so that was really rewarding and interesting. It was really nice because it gave me a lens on the nonprofit sector as a whole, which I really enjoyed, like kind of getting a sense of what organizations are out there, what work are they doing. And it was kind of during this time that I discovered graphic recording. I kind of stumbled upon this workshop through my job, and I said, I would love to be able to do this and just give it a try. And so I did it as like my professional development for the year for that job. And it was such an incredible weekend. It was a course taught by Stina Brown, who's a local graphic recorder and graphic facilitator and just does incredible work. And it was a small group of us. There's about 6 of us. And we just really got to focus on both how to create visuals really quickly and also like in the moment and listen really effectively. And since then, I just couldn't stop talking about it. Like it would just come up very organically in every conversation that I had. And so I was sort of unknowingly, in a way, marketing myself because I was just so excited about the work that led to me talking about it with friends that worked in the nonprofit sector, colleagues, just people I met at parties. Mm-hmm. And it got to the point where in 2021, I started noticing people reaching out saying, hey, Miranda, we'd love to hire you for this thing. And I was like, oh, interesting. I think the very first paid gig I had gotten was in 2019, but it was very here and there. And so the volume of kind of requests started to increase throughout the year. So it was very cool to see at the beginning of the year, it was maybe, 1 request a month to by the end of the year, I was doing 2 to 4 projects a month on top of my job.
Full-time job, right?
Yeah, full-time job. That I'd created some flexibility in my schedule, but it was, I think by the end of the year, it was still 4 days a week. And so it was just really a good year to give me the confidence that this was something that people wanted to hire me for and that I could consider as a full-time opportunity. It had always been a dream, but kind of having the proof of concept that, okay, if I did step out, I'm getting a good volume of people reaching out. It was just very, very exciting, a very exciting time.
That's really cool. And you mentioned 2021. That's still, coming out of the pandemic, and people are just starting to gather again and do stuff, and to be able to serve that role of being a graphic recorder, I imagine that would have been quite a special, unique time too.
Yeah, and for graphic recording, it was very interesting because in 2020, I wasn't doing a lot of paid work at that time, but I was very in the loop within the graphic recording community. And a lot of folks were just getting this flood of emails of canceled events. And at that time, graphic recording was primarily in person. So it was very challenging for a lot of folks and scary to see this huge shift where we just weren't meeting up in person. And I kind of saw the conversation change slowly, over the summer to the fall. People were then adapting to doing it virtually. So you had all these events shifting online. You also had graphic recording shifting online. So folks were figuring out all the tech aspects of, instead of doing it on paper, maybe you're doing it on the tablet or your iPad and linking it up to your camera feed. And so folks are able to see the graphic recording live and so that was really cool. And so the folks that were able to pivot digitally had a lot of success with that. And some even did, had a even better year financially because of
Oh, interesting.
the shift. Yeah, because there was so many folks that like Zoom fatigue was real and it came pretty quick. And so graphic recording was one way for events to be engaging and to keep people interested in the content and for it to feel a little bit less monotonous.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting for me to see that shift, and I fully wasn't expecting that to kind of shift into kind of my world. And but it did a lot. Some of the events I did kind of starting, what was it? Yeah. In 2021 were definitely virtual, and some like digital illustration as well. But yeah.
This is really interesting because really neat point and great noticing that coming from family with lots of artists, sometimes there's a lot more pressure and maybe, I don't know if this is the right phrase, but maybe self-doubt or questioning if that's the right thing or if you can get up to that level, I think you said. But when you mentioned your education, it was so diverse, like environmental studies, sociology, business. I imagine you trained your brain to just think in different ways. And so now, do you see that serving you in your current role?
Absolutely. I think if I hadn't done, if I had gone to art school versus the program I did, I think the trajectory to graphic recording would have been a lot harder, because for me, having that degree and the foundation of working in the nonprofit sector, I had sort of a sense of the issues that we talked about, the language that was used, considering things like accessibility and equity, diversity, and inclusion. Those are all things that I learned both in the working world and through university. And so it just really gave me such a good foundation to then be able to work with these nonprofits and have this understanding. And I think too, something that I will often say to clients is I've got a background in the nonprofit sector. I'm coming with some expertise, but you're the experts on your subject matter. Like, I'm always still keeping my ears open and being very mindful that I'm still learning too. And so making sure I'm still asking clients lots of questions and being an ear in the space, but I'm not the expert in the room. I'm capturing what's important to them and what matters to them and their participants.
That's so cool, because your heart, I think, from what I'm hearing, is you are someone who wants to support the nonprofit space, but it becomes, what is the piece of the puzzle you want to work on? Is it a, in-house person who does marketing and coordination or whatever? But now you've found this really cool niche that fulfills you and utilizes your skills and experiences and really serves value in the community as well.
Yeah, exactly. And thank you. And I think what's really cool, oh gosh, I just had this thought and it just left my brain. Oh, I think what's really cool is that when I was sort of thinking about career shifts, some of the work that I did in the nonprofit sector was very marketing focused, and I didn't necessarily want to stay in the marketing sphere forever. And there was some event management as well, like supporting conferences and different events and meetings. And I kind of had this moment of I don't think event management is something that I see myself doing long term, or I just didn't, it wasn't kind of my happy place. I could do it. But what was so fascinating is realizing, kind of waking up one day being wait, I work in events every day now, but I have such a specific role. And I think it's that when you're an event management role, you're spread in a lot of different directions. And as a graphic recorder, I am as well, but it's still very focused because it's different content, but it's a process that I'm getting to craft over time and build up an expertise in. And so that was really interesting to learn, because sometimes I think when we're thinking about career, we sort of discount a whole sphere, not realizing that there might be sort of a nugget within that actually would bring us a lot of joy and fulfillment.
Such a great point. And kind of coming back to this podcast and the season, we were chatting about career and money. I actually spoke with another guest about full compensation package and professional development fund being something to really make sure you use. And in fact, you mentioned you use your professional development funds and opportunity, time to explore and this new area. So was that something that you had to make a case for with your manager? I'm curious to hear more about that.
I'm so glad you asked this question. So what's fascinating is, so when I did that program, I remember I had gone for dinner with my boss and we were doing kind of a review on the year. And she's like, what would be your dream professional development? And I was like, oh, well, if we're just blue skying here, I was like, remember that course that we were promoting on our newsletter? I would absolutely love to do that. And then I was, but I know there's no way. And she was like, why not?
Oh, what a great boss to have that conversation with you.
Yeah. So it was so cool. And we found ways to use it in my role. Like we kind of integrated it into my role afterwards. And it was just so cool that, to have someone believe in me and see like, oh, hey, this is something that like my staff is really interested in. Let's give it a go. And I would definitely say that that's not always the case. Like I've had lots of other instances in other jobs where you say like, oh, this is my dream professional development, and it doesn't necessarily always happen. But I feel like it never hurts to ask. And I've also had instances where I've asked for professional development that was sort of somewhat outside of my current role, like a coaching program. And I got a yes to that as well. And I remember the second layer to that was there was sort of another step I could have done. And I wasn't able to do like the whole program paid by the organization, but they're like, oh, we can pay half for this. So it's always worth asking because you never know. Yeah.
Okay, so what are the best times to bring it up? Are they like formal evaluations? Is it just like off the cuff chit chat with your team? Do you have any advice?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, with the case of the graphic recording course, it came up kind of spare of the moment, but it was in the kind of context of sort of a casual performance review chat. I'd say one thing that can be challenging is if you have a lot of different interests in a lot of different directions. I have had instances of going to a supervisor and saying, I'm interested in this and this and this and this. And it's hard for the manager or supervisor to sort of see how all these different things are going to be useful. Like, I think if you can pick like one or two things that are like, these are my dream things, even if it can't happen this year, maybe it's something to happen next year. And when possible, if you relate it to your role, that can always definitely help your odds. But yeah, if you can focus in, like if there's a coaching program or a copywriting program or something that's just really been on your mind, bring it up and like kind of plant the seed as early as feels viable so that you can kind of warm your supervisor up to the idea would kind of be my take. And obviously it completely depends on the relationship, but yeah, being focused and planting the seed as early as you can would be kind of my personal approach.
For sure. And for those of you who maybe like newer to having these conversations, just get to know your organization's policy. I've worked in some workplaces where you really had to make a case for it, but I've also worked in other places where you just have a bunch of money that you can use every year. Buy whatever books you want. I then buy books that are not really directly related to my role, but something that I feel would give me the skills to maneuver into something new. Or I've also purchased like online subscriptions to audiobooks or, learning sites. And they're not monitoring what videos I click on or what books I click on. So that's another way of using your professional development fund.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so another piece here with the transition, as you said, you went down to 4 days a week. So it sounds like it was full-time and then part-time while you built your business, and then now you're just fully on your own. How long did that take, and how did you get there?
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely a journey and a process. And I mean, when I started, I didn't imagine I would be going full time. So it was just, I was like delightfully surprised that that's where I ended up. But I would say that during the year that I mentioned where I was just finding the sort of increase of requests coming in for people to hire me, I started thinking more and more about, oh gosh, how can I make this work? And so I negotiated going from, full-time, it was 35 hours a week because a lot of nonprofits roles are 35 hours, and then went down to, I guess, 28, is that right? Yeah. And so I had Fridays off, and the organization was doing a fortnight schedule. So some folks already had every second Friday off. So the nice thing for me is that transition wasn't too bad because half the office was usually away already on Fridays, so it was a much quieter day. I appreciate that, not all organizations have that, so it can, depending where you are, it can definitely be a harder ask, but I have definitely seen a lot of more conversations happening around 4-day work weeks. Like I feel like there's more evidence coming out in terms of it just being better for everyone, better for the employee well-being, and the employer. So it's definitely worth asking. And in that case, I negotiated the 4 days, and so I was doing that up until the end of the year. But there wasn't an opportunity for me to do fewer hours just based on the volume of work. And so I started to look at, okay, what are my other options? And I went on the search for a more part-time job elsewhere, and eventually landed an offer at the end of that year.
Okay, interesting. Now, when you negotiated to go down in the work hours, did they know you were doing it because your business was picking up?
Yes, that was definitely their reason, because they knew actually, often my illustrations or graphic recording would get integrated into the work that we were doing. And so they knew it was a passion of mine and something that I had a lot of energy to put towards. So yeah, they were very supportive in that regard.
Great. Yeah. So it sounds like that was just a really nice fit, and you had that supportive work culture to have those conversations. Like you said, not everyone will be in that boat, but it came to a point where you did look for a new job that had the hours that gave you the opportunity to pursue what you wanted. So in that role, I guess the job description outlined already was a part-time job. So that was easy in that case.
Yeah. And actually, thinking back on it, so the job I switched over to it had a lot of flexibility in how many hours it could be. And so I negotiated, I think, 14 hours a week, because I felt like I wasn't fully ready to dive 100% into the business, but I wanted kind of a little bit of a security net. So it would be covering, the basics. So rent and, a bit of my groceries. And then I would have 3 days a week. It didn't really work out that way because I ended up getting kind of a repetitive strain injury at the end of the year. And so my transition to part-time looked quite different than probably a lot of other folks, because it wasn't as simple as like, okay, now I have more hours to dedicate to my business. By the time I got to the role where I was working 14 hours, I'd actually kind of had to take a break from illustration, because I had been doing the 4 hours at my job, or sorry, not 4 hours, 4 days a week, and then was, by the end of the year, as I mentioned before, was doing 2 to 4 projects a month. And so I got quite burnt out. So I feel like, for me, it may have been valuable to kind of been able to make that shift sooner, or manage expectations of how many projects was realistic to take on. Something that and this isn't directly related to this question, but that I just feel is really important to highlight is I've seen a lot of folks that kind of talk about different shifts, especially when you're shifting from a full-time job to a full-time business. I've seen this advice in multiple places of you need to be doing making a full-time income at your full-time job and at your business at the same time.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even there when I was that fall, but I still burnt out. And so it's just, I don't know. I see where that advice is coming from. If you build this really high sense of security, but you have to be mindful of your personal capacity and what you can take on. And so for me, I think if I had been able to reflect on that more, I would have, maybe pivoted sooner. But yeah, it's just, I find that advice so interesting now, and I still hear it quite a bit. And, some folks can do it, and that's awesome, but you really have to kind of take a look at what's reasonable. And if you think it's reasonable and then it seems to not be, then just be mindful of that, because it's important to take care of yourself.
Oh, thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Because that's such a core part of what I advocate for as a career coach, is that every single person has a unique situation. So you can take in information and advice from different sources, but ultimately you're the only one who knows what are your financial obligations, what's your health status, what can you manage? Can you work that many hours a week? Or, maybe you have kids you need to pick up from school. So there isn't one formula, as much as it's nice to have a formula to kind of fall back on, but it does take a bit of that self-reflection. So for you, when did you decide to go full self-employment? What kind of triggered that?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I look back, I don't think there was a specific moment, but it was definitely over the course of 2021 that I started thinking, hey, I think this is a possibility. So it sort of involved a lot of conversations. I definitely am someone who likes to sort of scan the room, get a sense of, like, accumulate as much information as I can and as much advice to be able to reflect on and make a really well-informed decision. I think for me, though, what happened is that there were a lot of folks saying, hey, whoa, going full time with a business, that's like a big risk. And so there was a lot of sort of people putting up their hands and being like, whoa, slow down. But I was the one kind of in the driver's seat, seeing the emails come in and more folks. And I was building a website and getting everything up and running and being able to charge rates that I felt really good about because I was in this full-time role. And so I was building a lot of confidence that year, but also very mindful that I'm like, I've never done this before. I should really pay attention to what folks are saying around waiting, like not doing it too soon. But in my case, it kind of ended up being, maybe in my case, I could have gone a bit sooner and avoided some burnout or just slowed down in general. But I'm just trying to reflect on the question itself was...
Yeah, the question is around that transition from the part-time job to when you submitted a resignation or how did that go?
So I was looking for a part-time job that would just give me more flexibility. And I think what also made it more challenging is I sort of set this very, very kind of difficult, challenging goal for myself where I actually also wanted to be building a career in illustration graphic recording, but based on what I had learned through talking to different illustrators and more about the field, especially in illustration, was that a lot of folks do it part-time. I had set it up in my mind that I would also pursue a career in career development because that's always also been an interest of mine. Like even when I was a student, I was volunteering at the Career Center and helping students with their resumes and had always absolutely loved it. And so I thought, okay, that's what I'll do. But of course, there's, certain certification that's good to have with that sort of career. And I wasn't ready to fully like launch in and do like a 1-year program. So I was just like, I'll see what I can do with the skills that I have. And I did eventually land a role that was awesome. It was super flexible. The team was great. And I was able to negotiate the 14 hours a week. And it was a 9-month contract. But if I'd been maybe a little bit more flexible in terms of what that part-time job could have been, then maybe I would have been able to make that pivot sooner. So that was sort of a learning experience for myself in terms of the timing. But ultimately, that decision really came when I got the job offer. I think because I'm a cautious person, I probably needed a little bit of a push. And so it was really hard. It was hard saying goodbye. I'd been at the organization before for many years and really loved the team and loved the work. And so it was difficult to be like, okay, something brand new, because it's that kind of fear of the unknown. Like, you get comfortable where you are and it's like, oh, maybe I'll just stay here longer. So yeah, it was that job offer that helped push me over the edge to be like, okay, here we go.
And so it was a 9-month contract, so you knew there was an end date.
Yeah. And that was really a beautiful thing as well, because that sort of made a decision for me in terms of I didn't have to decide whether or not to stay at that job because it had a natural end date. And so that whole year I was able to, the beginning of the year I was kind of healing from the repetitive strain. So I was only working the 14-hour job. And then once it was kind of mid-year of 2022, I was able to kind of get back on my feet in terms of the illustration and really start building that out. And something that also was really pivotal for me, especially because of the injury and just all the decisions that go into starting a business and all the doubts that can come with it. I had hired a business coach. When was it? I think we started meeting in October 2021. And so we kind of delayed some of the sessions when I got injured. And then when I was good enough to meet up, it was really good motivation to keep working on my business. Because when you have an unexpected setback, everything can just feel like it's falling apart. And it's like, oh, what's the point? And I think having a business coach at that time was so so instrumental to being able to kind of stay motivated and have like homework and be like, oh, I got to get this homework done for my business coach. Even though it's like for me.
Really works.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I'm really grateful that I had that support. Yeah, I was working with Aura McKay, who supports creative business owners, and she was awesome.
Oh, cool. And you found someone that specifically works with creatives. That's neat.
Yeah.
So actually, this is a great jumping off point because, you talked about getting external support through a business coach in this case. What other supports did you find valuable in this whole journey?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So for me, looking at, okay, how do I shift to entrepreneurship? A lot of it was taking courses when I was still working full time. So, because everything from how to do your taxes when you're a sole proprietor to, do you want to be a sole proprietor or do you want to, there's different structures for businesses. So thinking about that, marketing courses, I found a lot of different half a day or 1 hour courses I could either take online or go in person to locally in Vancouver. And that was really good for building my confidence. Even like being able to, one example is I learned, when you're a sole proprietor, you can operate under your own name as a business name. And so when folks would be like, oh, who do I make, what's the business name I should make this out to? I could confidently say, make it out under my name without it sort of feeling like, oh, I'm not a real business. Because it's like, no, you can be a real business under your name. And so small things like that were able to just boost my confidence. Another piece that I should mention is because my mom is a graphic designer, I do have the privilege of being able to go to her for advice, but also I just grew up in an environment where my mom was sometimes working for herself and sometimes working for a company. And so things like how to send a quote or certain ways to negotiate or just how to run your business. There was a lot of that I had sort of absorbed over the years that I was able to put into practice. And that was really cool and something I really appreciate that my mom was able to sort of pass that knowledge on. And I know that not everybody has that, but that maybe segues to the importance of building up a community of folks that are in kind of a self-employment entrepreneurial space. When I first started, I barely knew kind of anyone that was doing the work. And so it was a matter of kind of finding people that I'd kind of met once or that might be willing to go for a coffee or do a phone call and just ask them. So doing definitely a lot of informational interviews, both in terms of whether they enjoyed running a business and also in terms of the kind of skills behind it. So I found a lot of those supports really valuable. And the last thing I would say is a support I feel I wish I'd known more about was that there's funding for entrepreneurs. Yeah. And it comes in a lot of different forms. I think maybe the reason I didn't think it applied to me is because there are some nonprofits that do a lot of financing or companies too, where they focus on financing, where it's sort of a loan or something that you're giving back, or it's kind of you're having investors coming into your business. And I had never really planned to get to that sort of scale. My business isn't, at least at this stage one, I'm planning to scale really big, more kind of work for myself. But there are also nonprofits that support entrepreneurs, especially when you're just starting out. So they can help you build a business plan, figure out all these little pieces that are so hard to kind of do when you're sitting by yourself in front of your laptop. And like Community Futures is one. They have a lot of remote locations, rural and remote areas in BC. But they do also have Community Futures BC for the province. So, and a federal one as well. So Futurepreneur is another one. Spring Activator, they're another one. So there's options out there depending on what type of business you'd want to start and whether or not you'd want it to scale. So yeah, and there's grants. There's grants. Even I know someone who got a grant for making their business more accessible. And, because they were neurodivergent, they were able to acquire some like equipment and things for their business to kind of make it more accessible for them and for them to be able to kind of launch with their business. So yeah, I just really wish that's something I had explored more early on, but I'm grateful that I know now and can kind of tap into some of those resources.
You gave such a great answer there to a simple question.
Oh, thank you.
Of course. I think what I'll do is also link to some of these resources you mentioned. In various roles I've had, I've also been in those supportive roles to facilitate connections, or I've participated in some of these programs or researched some of these programs you mentioned. What I find is don't be shy about just booking a call with, someone whose job is literally to talk to people like you. And then from there, often you get to know about other programs, other opportunities, and just keep turning each like new lead into other opportunities. And I would say this is relevant not only for business owners, but also for job seekers, right? Like the power of informational interviews, the more you know, the more people you talk to, it just exponentially increases your chances of finding the right supports for what you need in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Google and nowadays like AI, ChatGPT, you can even talk with those tools and they can probably pull information for you too. Specific to your geographical region, your, area of interest. You can also look at, like you mentioned, for one person, they're looking to increase accessibility because they're neurodivergent. Maybe there are things that might be applicable to you and your situation as well. So yeah, I'd say nowadays, like, try AI. Okay, so I would love to hear, again, back to the topic of money, because ultimately you mentioned like you still had to pay rent and pay for groceries and things like that. Do you have any money-related advice for folks to, know about or keep in mind as they consider or are in the process of making a transition into self-employment? Did you have savings, or did you like lower your expenses in any way, or any advice that you might be willing to share?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the journey to self-employment especially is such a personal one. And what I found is I would go online and look at what other people were saying. And so many people would say, oh, self-employment isn't for everyone. You have to have this level of risk tolerance, blah, blah, blah. And they just made it seem such a binary. And I sort of opted myself out. And it wasn't until I pushed through some of those anxieties and made the jump that I realized I love it and that I'm really thriving and enjoying running my own business. And so I think part of it is that like when you hear people say, oh, it's not for everyone because you have to have this very high like financial risk tolerance, like yes and no. And the reason I say that and that it's not a binary is you get to set up what works best for you. So for me, because my risk tolerance is lower, I went very gradually into it. I have a lot of, or I shouldn't say a lot, but I have like one or two friends that just dove right in. They're working one minute, the next they're quit their job. Okay, let's go do this and like make it work. And that is a really good way if you're feeling really ready and you have the desire and the confidence and you've tested the viability of your business and have a couple clients. But I think for me, that advice was given to me and it just made me completely clench up. I was like, oh gosh, I sat on it for like a month and I was like, I can't do that. I need to go gradually. And so that was one way that I worked within my risk tolerance. And another is the advice I mentioned earlier about, people say you have to have like a full-time income with your business on top of your full-time job. That's not realistic for a lot of people. And so figuring out what is realistic for you. So maybe a more nuanced piece of advice is people will say, have at least 3 to 6 months of savings before you even consider quitting your job. So that in the event that you didn't have 3 to 6 months of income, you have the safety net. And so again, thinking about what your risk tolerance is, if your risk tolerance is really low, maybe you're making sure you have 12 months. And thinking also about, okay, say you don't get clients for a month. Maybe that's an indicator that maybe you did jump too soon, but that's okay. You're building up the business and maybe you find a part-time job, or I have friends that they're working in a restaurant or a coffee shop or something in a previous field that they have expertise in part-time or full-time as sort of that financial safety net. So there's lots of different ways that you can play. So don't feel like it's a binary or I have the will to do it or I don't.
Right.
Be really as nuanced as you can about it and based on what you know about yourself.
Yeah. I think so much of the thinking behind it is binary and it has to be a certain way is because of what we see on social media.
Yeah.
There are so many people selling programs for their benefit, right? They're trying to sell you a fee or they're trying to sell you a certain way because you're their potential client.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, like, be a little meta, like self-aware, like lift yourself above it for a moment and think about what makes sense for you, just as Miranda so beautifully described. And this process is not linear. It's not like, okay, you go from working for someone else and then you go to working for yourself. Maybe it's back and forth. Yeah. And that's okay. Maybe it's your self-employment will always be more of a part-time. And that's okay too, right? Like there's no one you need to really answer to other than how fulfilled you are in how you're navigating your own career.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. There's a real sort of, I know for me there was a fear around what if I take the plunge and I sort of announce it on my social media and I kind of put it out into the world and then have to take it all back. Like, what if in a year or two I have to take it all back? And that just felt so scary to me. And I really had to kind of sit with myself and be like, that would be okay. And that would be awesome. And I get to choose how and when I share those updates. And yeah, it doesn't have to be like all or nothing. And the thing is, if I hadn't kind of taken the leap, I wouldn't have known whether or not I enjoyed it. And now I'm at the point where even if I didn't necessarily do illustration for the rest of my life, I love running my own business. I might even consider starting a different business at some point. There's no way I would have known that. And even the sort of career opportunities I think about if I were to ever pivot or do something new, I've built so many skills through running my own business and kind of providing my own services that my career opportunities have expanded in ways couldn't have even anticipated until I took the jump. It's sort of that kind of mindset of kind of just move forward and you'll have new experiences that will help better inform more decisions versus kind of feeling stuck and staying in the same place. And I'm someone who often will kind of stay in the same place for a long time. Like I like that sense of comfort. And so I fully appreciate that it's easier said than done.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like so much of building your career, growing your career, it's all about developing skills along the way and finding unique ways to transfer those skills into new applications, whether it's self-employment or working for someone else. So don't be afraid to put yourself in new situations and learn new skills. So neat to hear. Like going back to what you said earlier, you went to a networking event and you're like, there are all these job titles I didn't know existed. Even now, you are finding like there's so many opportunities that may be ahead of you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there was a fear too that, oh, if I move to this field that's so different than what I was doing before, that'll sort of be losing those skills. Or if I apply for a job in future in the nonprofit sector, like, oh, it's like too removed. When in actuality, I've largely, well, first of all, stayed in the nonprofit sector because the majority of my clients are nonprofits right now. But I feel like I'm building so many skills that I just wouldn't have anticipated. And so I'm just so glad I took the leap and just kind of kept a little bit more of an open mind to, what running a business entails and how it can kind of lead to great things.
Thank you. Yeah. So we've covered a bit about the money side. Do you have any like non-money advice or words of encouragement for folks who are feeling a little anxious, nervous, unsure about whether it's a general like job change or that big jump to self-employment?
Yeah, for sure. I think kind of going a little bit back to sort of the risk tolerance idea, something I realized is whenever I would be making career decisions of what I wanted to do, I would always, like my default would always be like, I have to be 100% certain about something before I make a decision, before I enter into something. And so obviously you can't really ever have 100% certainty. And so I tried to kind of like make that concept a little bit more like malleable for myself. And so I would play with the idea of like, okay, so I've got this, potential career direction, like becoming a career practitioner or a career coach. And I was like, okay, well, how much like information can I gather to kind of better understand the field, doing informational interviews and learning about the field and maybe taking a course or two. And then once I've done that, be able to reflect on like, how certain do I feel now, and what threshold do I have to get over? So for me, I was like, I feel like probably what's realistic is to feel like 60% certain, 70% certain. And if I can get myself to that level, then that's a good sign for me. It's sort of an indicator that this is something I should explore. Same with the illustration route. I was like, what if I don't like, drawing full time? And it's wild because it was one of my biggest passions. And it's just, the fear of like, oh, you're doing like art or passion, what you love, like, will you start to like love it less? But it's like, you can't know until you try it. And so all I could do is kind of figure out what's that threshold of confidence I need to have. And if I'm finding that over the years, I'm never meeting that threshold, like finding a way to like bring it down a little bit for yourself, like play with that as much as you can. I think another thing is often there's this sort of pressure to like figure out what you want to do, whether you're coming straight out of university or if you're in a job but you're feeling like, oh, I want to do something else, like this feeling that you have to have this crystal clear idea of what you want to do next and just kind of go for it. Like, you kind of see other people, it's like, oh, okay, now they're doing an urban planning master's program. Like, cool, I guess they just decided that overnight. Like, it's so funny how we kind of tell ourselves these stories when it's like that person was probably thinking about that program for like 8 years, right? Yes. And so thinking about ways to realize, these things don't happen overnight. And also there's ways to test them. So in my business minor program, we learned about like the minimum viable product. So it's like, instead of starting like a restaurant chain, you might start with a food truck, or, maybe it's like you go even smaller, like you kind of play with the exercise of, okay, maybe I try to do one farmer's market booth this year, or maybe I just host a dinner for 10 of my closest friends, right? Like, and maybe eventually that's leading to a restaurant, but you're sort of, you're testing ways to see if you like it. Like if you're making this dinner for 10 friends, did you enjoy it? Did you have to bring someone in as your sous chef, and how did you like supervising them? Like, were there costs involved, and how did you manage, the finances? So I feel like there's a lot of ways, no matter what your career is, to kind of do small tests. So that can be, also through doing informational interviews. So talking to people in the field. It can be, doing a course or a workshop, or, maybe you're doing those informational interviews and you ask people like, how could I kind of test this job out for a day? Maybe there's someone you can job shadow, who knows? So just get a little bit creative in terms of how you can test the idea of whether you're going to like something before you feel like you have to pursue it and make a decision. And actually, a couple of books I wanted to recommend kind of in relation to this question. One is called Refuse to Choose. And so it's the concept of when we start kind of getting into that binary thinking, to kind of take a step back and be like, there's actually like an infinite number of possibilities to consider, even if something like an opportunity comes along, sometimes there's opportunities to negotiate what that looks like. And you can test it in really small ways. Like I had a friend years ago say, oh, Miranda, hey, would you do the 100-day art challenge with me? And I said, I don't think I have the time for that, but I do have the time to do like a studio date once a month where we go to each other's spaces and just, make art together. And we still do that to this day.
Oh, so cool.
So yeah. So always consider throughout your career, if there's opportunities arising or opportunities that you're mulling over, like what could it look like? My partner considered doing a writing program this year and didn't end up doing it, but found a membership to like the BC Federation of Writers that had like access to writing groups and like mentorship and like, opportunities that would also have been in that writing program, but kind of at a more manageable scale for them at this current time. And so there's always different ways to look at it. Like if you're thinking about a career where you're just feeling like, oh gosh, this feels, doing a whole master's program or you're doing a whole, more degree or certificate feels too daunting. Like, is there something smaller you could do to test whether you like it? And also maybe would even give you enough experience to find an entry-level role in that field. So yeah, just find room to play when you can.
You're so good at summarizing all your points. Yeah, from finding your personal threshold of confidence, which might change over time, and to dipping your toes in. I always like to say, like, how do you test the waters, and like break it down as small as you need to. If you don't have the financial resources to invest in a course, is there like a free YouTube tutorial you could watch, right? Like, just keep breaking it down until you can find something that you can say yes to and you're excited to say yes to. And always, as Miranda has described, like, reflect on it after the experience. How did it go? What did you learn? And let that guide your next step. So Miranda, like, you're already being a career coach on this call. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And for my style of career coaching, I always like to say, like, life is more than work.
Yeah.
So what do you do outside of work? How do you recharge? And I, just being someone who knows you, know that you have some really interesting hobbies. So would you be willing to share publicly?
Yes, I could do that. Yeah, I think it's something that's been really important. Being self-employed and working from home has been finding ways to either get out of the house or do things at home that are not related to work. And so a big one for me in the past year and a bit has been stand-up comedy. I took a couple courses at Blind Tiger Comedy that does like improv, sketch comedy, stand-up classes, and just found this like awesome community of people, and have had a chance to do, like, I think last year I did like 9 shows and, you know, a couple open mics, and it was just a lot of fun. And I feel like it helps kind of bring levity to situations, and also has just helped my confidence a lot. So I'm just very grateful for finding that as an outlet. And another one is dance. I love doing all sorts of dance, whether it's, you know, like the video game Just Dance, or like going to a dance studio and doing a couple classes. I've done dance all throughout my teens and 20s and 30s. So I say 30s, I'm like early into my 30s, but it's been really, really fulfilling to be able to do dance as well. And then, the last one that's always kind of been on the back burner has been like painting and art. And, in the past, like 6 months to a year, I have been sort of revving up my abstract art practice. And so I think it's so funny. I have a very like entrepreneurial minded brain. And so I'm already sort of finding ways to turn this abstract artwork into another income stream for my business. I had an art show in November that actually you came out to, Crystal, which thanks for coming, and you bought a painting.
Yeah, so maybe I'll post a picture of it along with us.
Oh yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for coming out to that. It was such a good experience, and through that I ended up getting a large commission request.
Cool,
so
congrats.
Yeah, thank you. So January kind of to March, I'll be creating this large painting. It'll be 4 feet by 5 feet. So I'm very excited to work on that. So that kind of, you know, that's kind of a new income stream, but also still like a real passion. And so I keep very busy. I like to say I'm not very good at relaxing, but I'm getting better at having fun.
Oh, that's such a great way of saying it. Yeah. Just you and I throughout the years have always had catch-up calls regularly, because we're both people who have a lot of things on the go, lots of ideas, and just supporting each other. And it's so cool to just see where you've landed, and congrats again on that project that you have coming up.
Thank you.
That commission. I wonder if you would like to share, where can folks see some of your art, or find out when you're going to do stand-up next, or even learn more about graphic recording? Can you share some of, like, where can folks find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the best way to connect with me through social media is Instagram. You can find, I've got an illustration Instagram that is Mira_creates. And then if you wanted to follow my abstract work, that's Mira's_art lab. And I've also got a website if you kind of want to do a deeper dive on kind of my graphic recording style and illustration style. So you can find that at MirandaMaslany.com. And I'm sure we'll post the spelling in the...
We'll post the spelling.
Yeah. So I think those are the best ways to find me. And yeah, feel free to say hi if any of you have kind of burning questions from this podcast. Happy to answer any questions on Instagram, or you can send me an email. So yeah, that's the best way.
Yay. Thank you, Miranda. You talked about finding more levity and fun, so I hope this experience was an enjoyable one for you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. And it's so funny. I feel like, I hope I didn't talk too fast. I had so many things I wanted to share, and it's such a cool topic. And I really appreciate that you're kind of bringing this to people in a way where they can get examples of other people's careers, but at the same time reflect on their own careers and where they might want to go.
Mm-hmm. Inspiration, but ultimately everyone gets to make their own decisions.
Exactly.
Thanks for listening to the After Work Hangout. If you enjoy honest conversations about career decisions and life choices, remember to subscribe to the After Work Hangout so you'll know when our next episode drops. And don't forget to leave a 5-star rating while you're at it. You can find a summary of this episode along with more information about our guests and resources that were mentioned at relocal.ca. That's RELOCAL.ca. If you take a look around the website, you'll also find blog posts, downloads, and community offerings to support your career development. I'm your host, Crystal Lee, and I'm always interested in hearing what topics you'd like to learn about. You can connect with me on Instagram at relocal.ca, or you can email me at crystal@relocal.ca. Finally, I want to say a big thank you to all the guests and supporters who make this podcast possible. This includes my podcast manager, Lindsay Curtis, and graphic designer, Alex Dewar, who created the podcast art. Thanks again for listening and sticking around. I hope you're more inspired and ready to make the moves that are right for you. See you at the next Hangout.